Hey team, massive welcome back to Season 3, Episode 2. You're listening to the Golden Wings podcast. I'm Kurt, your host, and as you're listening to this, the boys will already be back training, and we can finally say that preseason has officially begun. We're a tick over 60-odd days away from round one against Gold Coast, which is very exciting, and over the next 2 weeks, we're going to run through every single player on the list and have a short chat about where they sit coming into 2026, what we expect from them, and a few of the major talking points around contract, positional changes, and the like. So really excited to kick things off with the Hollywood Boulevard this week, but I'm almost looking forward to next week even more, as obviously the later digit players with the later draft picks and the rookies have a lot more of an unknown quantity to them and a little bit more upside. So that should be an exciting one as well. We're going to kick things off all the way from Willem Duursma through to Matt Flynn today, 1 to 25. And then we'll go from Bo Allen, 26, through to Harry Schonberg, 48 next week. But just before we get into it, I just need to quickly say a massive thank you for the reception that we got from the first episode. First time appearing on YouTube, and we absolutely smashed the reach out of the park. We've tapped into a whole new market. And I just wanted to say that I'm very appreciative for all the feedback, everyone who jumped on board. It meant a lot to be so supported. So with that out of the way, we are going to chat through every single player. We're going to do it through numerical order. It only makes sense, and really excited to start things off with our new number one, last year's number one draft pick, Willem Duursma. And there are a few talking points around Willem and a few that were raised from my best 23 video last week, which if you haven't seen, you should definitely go and check it out. But I had him in our starting best 23 and I had him lining up on the wing, and a few people weren't super happy with that. A few people asked a question around whether or not he's going to play round one. I think it's fairly certain we can lock it away that he's in our best 23 players as it stands, and he'll be lining up round one. But the question that probably made me think the most was where actually is his best position. I've had him lining up on the wing out of necessity because we don't really have a guy that can fill that role to the standard that he can. And we've got players that can roll through the half-back line and probably have a similar output to Willem. So it's more of a where do we get the most value sort of equation from the way that I'm looking at it. But a few people have said that he's going to play his best footy at half-back, which is probably fair enough. He's definitely more of a well-known quantity there. I've got no evidence to say that he's going to start in the midfield, which a few people did bring up. I just don't think that he's ready, but we know that he's been training in there through the preseason, so anything's possible. But as I said last week, I expect that once Match Sim starts, we'll see him probably line up in an outside role and pinch hit in the midfield at times, but I wouldn't expect him to be a mainstay. And then you'll see, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that I've got some talking points up on the screen for each player. And for Willem Duursma, the last one there is a rising star chance. And I just really wanted to highlight how important it is that we finally have some more top tier talent. Since we've been rebuilding, we've hit the draft really hard and we've been quite savvy with our selections and the trading of our top end selections, which has held us in pretty good stead, but it's led to us trading away a top 3 pick for Reuben Ginbey and Elijah Hewett, who are great talents, but they aren't of that top 5 pick pedigree. We saw it again in 2024 when we traded away pick 3 for Bo Allen, Liam Baker, Matt Owies, amongst other things. So I've always been quite envious of other teams like North Melbourne who have this stack of top end talent. And finally, we've got 2 number 1 draft picks in the side together. So I suppose it's just going to be really exciting to see Willem go about his business. We know that he's not going to be the complete product when he steps onto the field in round one, but he's going to bring us some of that excitement. You don't get to be pick 1 without being an exceptional talent, and we're going to see that come to the forefront at stages throughout next season, no matter where he's lining up. So I suppose I'm just really excited to see him and Harley out on the park. Finally, a few top 5 draft picks, not to mention CDT as well, who we're going to talk about a little bit later. Wherever Willem lines up, we're going to see some very exciting run and carry plays from him. We're going to see some big marks, and we are going to find out mid to late January, I'm assuming, when Match Sim starts to really kick off, where Mini has a role carved out for him at this stage. So we're going to watch intently for that. Moving on to someone who isn't a new addition, but definitely feels like it, our number 2, Jake Waterman, back from a bit of a layoff with that unfortunate shoulder injury, which kept him out of the back end of the season. And we just really need Jake to get a good run at it this year, especially now that Oscar Allen's left. The responsibility of this forward line really does rest on Jake Waterman's shoulders. You take away Liam Ryan as well, our second leading goal scorer last year and one of our senior players in that line. All of a sudden, we've got Jamie Cripps and Jake Waterman leading a very young forward brigade. We're not sure how many games Jamie Cripps is going to play this season, which we'll touch on a little bit later, but we really need Jake to be out on the park as much as possible. But this added responsibility and having the forward line all to himself isn't such a bad thing. We know that in 2024, he had his breakout season. It was on the back of having to take on most of the load himself. And he really relished in that opportunity with Oscar Allen out of the side for a fair portion of that season. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing that he's got all the added responsibility. We just really need him on the park. But if he can play 20 plus games for us next season, there's no reason why he can't get back into Coleman medal contention and recapture that All-Australian form, which would go a long way to keeping us in games and kicking enough goals to get a few scalps along the way. So from what I'm hearing, he's been back training to good effect, and I'm just really excited to see the Loosh back out there because we are a 3, 4, 5 goal better team with him on the park. Next up, unfortunately, is a player who won't play every game for us next season. It is our reigning John Worsfold medalist, Liam Baker. He is starting the year off with that one match suspension, unfortunately, but he's going to be back in a big way. And the question is, where is he going to line up? We know that he can roll through the midfield. We know that he's played the majority of his footy as a defender. We know that we probably need him the most in the forward line, and he did a great job of that in the back end of last season for us. But the jury's still out, and as it stands, we're hearing he's been training as a defender, but you're going to hear me say this a lot throughout this video and probably next week as well. It's going to be interesting to see where he lines up in the match sim. That's when we're really going to get an idea. But I've heard a few of you make a case for just about every line on the field for Bakes. But I'm really excited to see if he can take his game to the next level, if he's given that security of playing one position. Again, it's all going to come down to injury and what's going on around him. But one of the main points, and again, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the talking points there that I've got written down. I've got captaincy written down there with a question mark. And while Liam Duggan is still the captain of the footy club, and this isn't supposed to be an attack on him in any way, I think that it's been a conversation for the last 8 months or so that Liam could potentially be the one to carry the team forward if Oscar Allen was to leave. And I'd be surprised if he wasn't the skipper come the start of pre-season, if not co-captain alongside Liam Duggan. So that's something to keep an eye out for as well. Let me know in the comments where you'd have Bakes lining up. It's definitely a topic that divides, but geez, it's a good dilemma to have, and we're very lucky to have him. Looking forward to seeing how he backs up his first season in the blue and gold. Taking out the best and fairest, you can't ask for a much better start than that. And I'm keen to see if our next player can have a similar impact. Of course, I'm talking about our new number 4, Brandon Starcevich, who was our star acquisition over the trade period, coming across from Brisbane on the back of 2 premierships and 3 consecutive grand finals. Hopefully we can make it 3 in a row for the big fella. I don't love our chances, but he's come across on a big contract, obviously signed through to 2029 and being paid the big bucks to help us right the ship and start to build a strong winning culture. And by the sounds of things, he's wasted no time in making a really strong impression on the group, which is great to hear. And again, similar to Baker, I'm really excited to see where he's going to line up. If I had to guess, he's going to be that lockdown defender guy, but we know that he was sold a little bit of midfield time early on in the pitch from the Eagles when they identified him as a target. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if he gets a little bit more of an offensive defensive role, or whether or not he just slots straight back into his role, which we know he's so good at, and focuses on locking down the opposition's best. But as I said last week, Brandon is a class act and a really strong finishing touch to this back line. The concussion is a bit of a worry. Some of you might remember that throughout last season, I did reference Cal Toomey and say that he believes that the concussion issues have been overblown, and there is a little bit more leeway than most people think and than what we've been led to believe. We've also got the concussion relief fund there to get us out of jail from a contract stance as well. So it's important to keep in mind that while there is some risk attached, and the truth is we might not get to see him play out his full contract, I am hopeful that the fear has been overblown a little bit, and hopefully the truth is somewhere in the middle, and we can see some really good footy from Brandon Starcevich next year and beyond, because it is going to go a long way to shoring up that back line, and his leadership is no doubt going to go a long way with players. Much like our next player, which we've got to discuss, another new addition, our new number 5. It is Josh Lindsay, our pick 19 from last year's draft. And he's going to be slotting into that backline at some stage next year at AFL level. I'm certain of that. If you asked me, I'd say that he'd be starting round 1. But I know that a lot of you who gave me feedback last week don't quite share that same optimism. So I suppose we'll see where that lands, especially come match sim. There's going to be an A team and a B team all throughout the preseason. So going to be interesting to see where it lands. I expect that we're going to see him pretty early on in the season if it's not round 1. And one thing about Josh Lindsay is you can absolutely rely on him being a sponge to guys like Liam Baker and Brandon Starcevich, who we've just spoken about. He's as professional as they come, very classy footballer in itself. And I'm really excited about the prospect of not only what he can add to us next year on field, but a long time going forward. Sign that 3-year contract as a first round draftee, and hopefully we can get over 50 games out of him before he's out of contract. He comes in and he's instantly the best kick in the squad, let alone the best kick out of the back line. But does beg the question, where does he play? If a player like Elliot Yeo, who we're going to talk about next, does go back to defense from the midfield, then potentially it pushes Josh Lindsay up to a wing. So it's going to be interesting to see where things lie, but you can really get excited about Josh Lindsay. He probably has flown under the radar a little bit for the average Eagles fan, given that he's not a top 10 draft pick and he was drafted from over east, but this guy's not going to take long to win you over. With that classy left boot, he doesn't miss a target and he's exactly what we need out of the back line. We know that the skills were absolutely deplorable at stages last year and made us borderline unwatchable at stages, and Josh Lindsay is going to go a long way to fixing that. So I hope he gets his opportunity early, but we are going to have to wait and see. I just alluded to it then, but another interesting dynamic to the way that this team is going to shape up is Elliot Yeo, contracted for another 2 years, and we know that we're a better team with him on the park, so perhaps it is time to start thinking about longevity. If you tuned in last week, you know that I had him starting in the midfield because we really need his presence in there. But literally the day that that was released, a report came out, I think it was from 10 News, with an interview, and I'm led to believe that Yoey essentially in a nutshell said that he's not going to be up to playing full midfield minutes, and he's potentially going to have to look for a home in another line, which probably wasn't the biggest surprise in hindsight. At 32 now, we are going to have to try and prioritize his body and make sure that we can get more games out of him than we don't. The interesting thing though is that it's still up for debate as to where he's going to play. It hasn't been ruled out that he could go into the forward line, which I think is an interesting dynamic. He's rested there in the past going through the midfield and caused some headaches for defenders, but we also know that he's been an All-Australian halfback and that's where he made his start to his career. So going to be interesting again. I hate to keep saying that, but it's the truth. There are a lot of moving parts here with the way that the best team's going to shape up, and Elliot Yeo is going to be a big part of that no matter where he's playing. So let me know where you think he should play. My gut just says put him down back where we know that he's a known quantity, but the preseason, silly season in me wants to see some experimentation with the team and see if he can go forward in some match sim and cause some headaches for the back line and see if that's something worth persisting with. But ultimately, I'd be lying if I said that I don't think he'll end up in the back line, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think it's a good call and we definitely need Yoey on the park for as many games as we can next year. So a transition out of the midfield was always going to be on the cards, and I'm glad that they're getting on the front foot and making it happen sooner rather than later. I love the grit and determination that Yoey plays with, and the next player is a player that reminds me a lot of the way that Yoey goes about it, and that is Reuben Ginbey, our runner-up John Worsfold medalist from last season. I think that we've all come to terms with the fact that he's going to play his best footy in the back line, and that doesn't have to be such a bad thing. I spoke about it last week in the Best 23 episode, but I'm hoping that he can take his game to another level again, just with the added confidence of knowing what he can achieve, because it was a really special year last year, and he would have been right around All-Australian talks if he didn't play for the Eagles. But there's no reason why, if he backs it up again, he can't be in the conversation for the All-Australian squad next year. And I touched on it last week, but I would like to see Reuben continue on in that third tall role, supporting Harry Edwards and Tyler Young as the other two key defenders in the starting lineup. And with Brandon Starcevich and Brady Hoff hopefully returning to the back line, potentially Elliot Yeo and Liam Baker, Reuben can afford to go on offense a little bit more, using his run and carry a little bit more freely, and also using his athleticism and his footy IQ to chop off the ball and get proactive in the air as our real interceptor. Now that we've lost Jeremy McGovern, I'm hoping that that's something that we can see from Reuben's game, but a very well-known quantity now, and we know what we're going to get from Reuben. So really looking forward to seeing that blonde mullet back out there flying around for us next season. Next up, of course, is his partner in crime and his fellow top draftee from their draft class. It's Elijah Hewett. He's out of contract this year and coming off a really solid runway in 2025. He's a very motivated young fella, and all things are brewing up for him to put together a big season this year. He got a taste of it last year with some really good performances. That Melbourne game sticks out to me with around 15 touches and 3 goals. The North Melbourne game in Bunbury as well, when the boys lost the unlosable. Huey was driving the midfield the whole game, and I was really impressed with what we saw from him, considering how interrupted his career has been, even his junior career as well, with that foot injury. Glad to see him finally put it behind him, and now I think we can start to really get excited about what we saw from Elijah Hewett in patches and hope that that becomes a little bit more of a consistent feature and hope that his explosive, powerful best can become a little bit more consistent and he can become a really important contributor for us. I think that this year is probably the year that he takes a step forward. Contract year, as I said. Before I heard the Yeo news, my question probably was, will he be a full-time midfielder or will he mostly be a forward half player who pinch hits? But now that Elliot Yeo has all but ruled him out of being a full-time midfielder, I think that opens the door perfectly for a player like Elijah Hewett, who shares a lot of the same traits, obviously the power, the aggression and the forward-leaning nature. And I think he's ready. If he can have a good preseason, I think it would make a lot of sense to start him as a mainstay midfielder. Looking forward to seeing if he can continue that partnership with Harley Reid, which brought us a lot of excitement last season. And of course, Harley is our next player that I've got on the list. Contracted through till the end of 2028 after signing that deal. And from all reports, he's attacked the off-season the right way and he's given himself a really good launch pad to launch into this preseason and come out fit and firing from round one and hopefully put together his best season in the AFL off the back of a slightly disappointing 2025, but a 2025 which I feel was pretty justified when you look at all the moving parts. And he's got some added midfield support around him, although Elliot Yeo probably isn't going to be in there the way that we were hoping he would. We've added players like Devon Robertson, Harry Schonberg and Finn McRae to come in and do a lot of the grunt work. Elijah Hewett, as I just touched on, is ready to go to the next level. Brady Hoff showed that he can do it at stages. We've got Tom McCarthy, who we're going to touch on shortly as well, coming into the midfield. Tim Kelly, hopefully he can be rejuvenated. Liam Baker, the list goes on. So he's got some support around him now and he doesn't have to be that everything midfielder, which we needed him to be last season. And I'm really just excited to see this kid get back to his exciting best. Next up, we've got quite an interesting one. Number 10, Tyler Brockman, out of contract this year, and it's going to be a long road to crawling back from some of the off-field dramas which we've been seeing. We know that his best is good enough, but he keeps putting himself in a position for his AFL career to be in jeopardy, and unfortunately the club can only give out so many chances. So for Tyler's sake and the sake of the team, I really hope that he can put whatever it is that's going on behind him and get back to training, have a good preseason and claw his way back into the team. But as it stands, I don't have him starting in the team. And as I said before, it can be difficult to overcome these things. So it's going to be a career-defining year for Tyler, but he feels a position of need in that small forward line, which is going to work in his favour. And all we can hope for is that he gets back into the club and puts his head down throughout the preseason and gives himself the best opportunity to come out the right side of whatever it is that's going on. Next up, we've got Tim Kelly, and it's a big year for Tim, coming fresh off a 2-year contract extension last season. He's got a bit of a point to prove throughout this preseason after being dropped last year, obviously admitting to a lot of struggles with motivation and love for the game, and all of that jazz. Got a fair run last year, so been rewarded with a 2-year contract extension, and we're going to need to see him repay that faith to the footy club. The last 4 weeks last season saw a real uptick in his performance, and we're going to need to see that continue throughout 2026 if he's going to keep his spot in the side, because Minnie's shown that he's not afraid to drop senior players and swing the axe if he needs to make a statement and if it's for the better of the team. So with that said, in my best 23 last week, I had him starting on field in the forward line as a first rotation midfielder. The Elliot Yeo news probably means that Tim's going to have to spend more time in the midfield than I originally expected, but I'm just hoping that we can see him get back to his best. He's only 31, so he still has a couple of years of good footy left in him, and you only have to look back a couple of seasons to when he was winning games off his own boot, and he was being tagged after we lost by 100 points the week before because teams were genuinely worried about him turning the game and getting us in a winning position, which he did on a number of occasions that year. So we are going to need him fit and firing if we're going to be competitive. So hopefully we see a rejuvenated Tim Kelly hit the track early January and all things leading towards a better season in 2026. Next up, we've got Sam Allen, our new number 12. I think he was picked 29 in last year's draft, and a really exciting prospect. But as for next season, probably can't expect too much from him. Coming back from his ACL injury that he sustained early on in his draft year, the focus is no doubt going to be how many games of waffle can we get into him safely in the back end of the season. We know that he's a meticulous professional and that he's been attacking his rehab really well since he's got to the club, the same way that he was before he was drafted. So very impressive young fella, and I've got no doubt that he's going to play a lot of senior footy for us in the future. I don't think we need to rush him back, but it is worth noting that a high draft pick last season was Taj Houghton for the Tigers, and he sustained an ACL at a similar time in his draft year to Sam Allen, and he was able to come back and play some very exciting AFL games in the back end of the season after starting off in the VFL post-recovery. So there's definitely a chance that Sam Allen can make his debut next year. If it were up to me, I'd probably just wrap him in cotton wool and get him ready for the preseason next year. Some waffle experience is nothing to be sneezed at, particularly since I don't think he played any senior footy and he was out with an ACL before the national championships. So remains to be seen how his game translates to the senior level, but with the head on his shoulders and the freakish athletic traits that this guy has, we're going to see him tearing up the Optus Stadium in no time. And so contracted through to 2027, I expect that they probably give him a 1-year extension at some stage throughout this season, just to give him that extra security. So when he comes back in 2027, he's got that weight off his shoulders. But looking forward to seeing Sam Allen get his opportunity, but I don't think it's going to be next season. A player who hopefully will get his opportunity again this season and definitely needs to take it is Noah Long. Out of contract at the end of this year, and it could very well be a make or break season for Noah Long. He was earmarked as Jamie Cripps' long-term replacement from the minute that he walked in the door, really impressing in his first preseason, and we're all absolutely sold on this kid who looked like he just got pinched out of an under-12s game somewhere in country Victoria, but he came across and really won us all over with a strong debut season, finishing top 10 in the best and fairest as the second last pick of the draft. It was really impressive, but he struggled to get going ever since that second season. Probably a bit of a case of the second year blues, and then early on in that year he did sustain a PCL injury which sidelined him for the rest of it. He ended up coming back last year and playing a few AFL games, but just wasn't able to hit the heights that we know he's capable of. And so hopefully a full preseason is going to allow him to come in and carve out a role for himself in the team, because we're lacking small pressure forwards as it is. And Jamie Cripps, who we just said we were hoping Noah Long could potentially replace in the future, he's playing his last season this year, you'd have to think. We'll touch on that in just a moment, but I certainly haven't lost faith that he can still be that guy for us that we're hoping that he could be when he was granted Luke Shuey's old number 13. So big year for Longy, but he's finally got everything back in his favour in terms of injury. The way that Noah goes about it really does align with the way that Andrew McQualter wants to play his footy. So hopefully for Longy's sake, he can come in and make an impression and earn himself another contract, because we need someone to step up and take that role, and there's no reason why it can't be Noah. Next up, number 14, it is our captain, Liam Duggan, contracted for another 3 seasons, captain of the footy club. So obviously all we're really hoping for is that Duggo can overcome these injury niggles and get back to playing his best footy. We know that he's been hampered a fair bit with some leg issues over the last couple of seasons. That's seen a real drop-off in his form, but we're going to need him to overcome that if he's going to even keep his spot in the side, because there is some real young emerging talent on this list who can play in that backline, and Duggo's not playing in the backline, then I'm not sure if there's any room for him in the team at all. Some people might not like to hear that, but he is 29 now, and once you get over 30 in a rebuilding side, if you're not adding to the team, then your position can often become vulnerable. So much like a lot of players that we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks, it's a big season for Duggo. We're only a couple of years removed from him being a really reliable contributor across the half-back line with his toughness. He used to take a lot of marks and distribute the ball really well and be a little bit of a marshal. He sort of stepped into that Shannon Hearn role once he retired. So hopefully we can see the best of Duggo in 2026. Next up is our number 15, Jamie Cripps. Jamie's out of contract this season. He's 33 years old and he's been a fantastic servant of the footy club for a very long time, but you'd be crazy not to assume that this probably is his farewell season. There's a question mark on his body and whether or not he'll be able to pull through for every single game, and I also believe that it's probably time for him to explore a role a little bit closer to goal, so we can use him as a bit more of a goal sneak and let some of the younger players do all the hard running that Cripps has been renowned for and built a name for himself on the back of. So obviously our leading goal kicker last season, and we're going to need some of that experience in this forward line. So hopefully we can get as many games out of him as possible, as many goals out of him as possible as well, and hopefully we can send him off in the right way and get a few wins this season for the old fella, because he's, as I said, he's been a great servant of this footy club, and we're going to miss him sorely when he does hang up the boots. Along a similar vein is Matt Owies, and while he's only 28 and not staring down the barrel of retirement, he's a small forward who we're going to need to get back to his best to help fill a little bit of a void in the team, which is shaping up in our small forward line. I'm just really hoping that last year was a bit of an anomaly, because what I saw genuinely shocked me. I know I do tend to be a bit of an optimist, and if you've listened to this show for a while, you know that to be the case, but I think it was justified to believe that Matt Owies was going to be a good addition, coming off the back of 60 goals across his last 2 seasons in the navy blue. I think that what he dished up last year was closer to an anomaly than what we should come to expect from him in the future, and hopefully he can regain a little bit of that Carlton forward, because we really are crying out for a goal sneak and a pressure forward, and we know that Matt Owies can be that guy. I'm really hoping that he can better adjust to the system and the lifestyle over West. To use another player in the AFL as an example, we saw Lachie Schultz transition from Fremantle to Collingwood as an A-grade small forward and really struggled to get going in his first year. And that can happen in the small forward line because teams require their small forwards to play in different roles. Collingwood is a lot more of a system-based team, whereas at Fremantle, Lachie Schultz had a little bit more freedom, a little bit more responsibility. So it took Lachie Schultz a whole season to get used to that new system and game style. And when he did, he was able to come out this year and put together a much better season for the Pies. So hopefully we can see a similar trajectory for Matt Owies. I know a lot of people would be happy to see him banished to the waffle and never return, but thinking realistically, he's got a couple of seasons to run on this contract, and I really hope that he can force his way into the team and be that senior head and the goal sneak that we need in the forward line. Speaking of a senior head, next up is Jack Graham. There's not a whole lot to say about Fridge. You just know what you're going to get from this bloke, and he's still deceivingly young too, only 27 years old. That definitely surprised me. But with Elliot Yeo potentially taking a step out of the midfield, Fridge is probably going to be required in there a little bit more than we thought he might have been coming into this season. Not such a bad thing though. We know that he's an absolute workhorse and defensively minded, which is important. Hopefully he can allow the more offensively minded midfielders like Elijah Hewett, Harley Reid and Tom McCarthy, who we'll touch on next, to play their natural game. So big year from Fridge, and I expect that he'll be playing a lot more midfield time now that Elliot Yeo has stepped out of the frame. That leads us to our new number 18, which is Tom McCarthy. And as we discussed last week, I believe that he is set for some more midfield time. He's already impressing in his first AFL preseason. The new high-performance manager, Phil Merriman, said that he's an absolute beast. And the idea of having him using his traits, his fitness, his footy IQ and his ball use in the midfield is an exciting proposition. And he's absolutely hit the nail on the head. I think that he starts inside and hopefully he can carve out a role for himself in there because he has all the skills to be a really solid AFL player. And we saw that in his magical debut season. So hopefully not a case of the second year blues. He's 25, so I don't think that that should be as much of a factor as it is for the newer draftees. So big year for T-Mac, contracted through to 2028 and he absolutely earned it. So I'm very excited to see how the midfield experiment goes and looking forward to the preseason matches and some of the match sim as well to get a look of how that dynamic as a whole midfield brigade is going to shape up in the new season. Hey legends, very sorry to interrupt. Currently editing this podcast and unfortunately our camera ran out of storage halfway through the next player. So we've had to cut it here. Very frustrating, but you learn these things the hard way. As I said, unfortunately we are going to have to pick up from where we left off next week. Apologies for that, but I hope you enjoyed the first installment. Looking forward to next week where we can talk about some of the later digits where there is a little bit more upside with those players as they are a little bit of a lesser known quantity. So that should be exciting. Hope you enjoyed this one. Remember to subscribe or follow along wherever you're listening. Drop a comment and let us know what you think. And make sure you're following us on Instagram. That's an absolute non-negotiable for any West Coast supporter. It's absolutely the place to be. So head over at Golden Wings Podcast on Instagram for all your news, preseason updates. We talk trade. We do a little bit of draft throughout the year as well. And it really is your one-stop shop for everything West Coast Eagles. So I'll see you there and you know where to find us back next week for some more player profiles. I'll chat to you soon.